Today we're going to explore if there is such a thing as too much equity for homeowners who are 60 or older. So if you're a homeowner that's 60 or older, you are going to want to watch this video. Let's go ahead and dive on in. So how much equity is too much equity? First, let me start off by saying that I'm a big believer in home equity. I have recorded many videos and spoken to many classes of first-time home buyers touting the power of equity. So it may seem, for those who know me, that this is a contradiction of terms to start talking about too much equity at this stage in the game. But truthfully, it's not. Because the reality is that when we start looking towards retirement, which is what most people 55 to 60 start to do, there are different things that you have to take into consideration when you get to that stage. There's different planning, there are different aspects, different facets of financial independence that you now have to take into consideration that before, when you had envisioned working for another 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that was just not a factor. The reality for most folks approaching retirement is 50 to 70%, in some cases even more, of their net worth is tied up in their home. For some people, that's the only asset that they have. It's the single most important thing that they have, their home. And that property, that home, generates 0% income. It's not like a bank account that you're getting interest from, and it's not like a stock portfolio that may be paying dividends. Your home, as you're living in it, typically generates zero interest, zero income for you to be able to live on. And so the consideration that you have to focus on as you're facing retirement, or as you're looking down the road to retirement, when this is your financial position, is you have to be aware, or you ought to be aware, of the fact that you are facing significant concentration risk. So what is concentration risk? When talking to a wealth manager, one of the first topics that they're going to bring up is this concept of diversification. And it's been long believed that when you diversify, you reduce your risk. Putting too much of your wealth in one basket, just like the term putting all your eggs in one basket, makes you vulnerable. The issue is that your home is an illiquid asset. And what that means is that it can be difficult to get cash out of that property. It may be difficult to convert it into cash. It's also subject to ups and downs of the real estate market. If the market is doing well, your investment's going to do well. If the market's doing poorly, things aren't selling, they're sitting for a while, that could be a challenge. As you're starting to contemplate retirement, it's really important for you to figure out how you can diversify your portfolio to make sure that you're going to have enough to meet your needs as they arise. You don't want to be cash poor and home rich, because again, that creates a significant exposure to you. So let's talk about some ways that we can look at to minimize concentration risk. There are 3 questions that you should ask yourself at 60. And the first question is, what percentage of my net worth is my home? If the answer is 40 to 50% or more, you may want to take a closer look. The second question is, does my home produce income? Some people are in a situation where a portion of the home may be converted to an accessory dwelling unit. They can potentially rent a portion of the home out, and that could generate some income. There may be some other mitigating factors where you're able to use your home to generate some type of income. That is a question that you're going to want to ask yourself. It's, for the most part, a primary resident does not create income. It was not designed to be a cash flow asset, and so typically, except for rare circumstances, it does not do that. And the third question that you want to ask yourself is, how expensive is it for me to maintain this home? Is this too expensive? Can I afford it? As you're getting older, so is your home, and it can become a financial drain as you're looking at repairs, some of which can be significant to keep up the home as it ages, not to mention other related expenses that go with an aging home. So really important to make sure that you're focused on What percentage of your net worth is your home? Is it producing income? And how expensive it is to maintain. Now, there are times when having a lot of equity is perfectly safe and there's no problem. And there are certain circumstances that you have to look at as you're making this assessment. So if you're in a situation where you have a pension or a 401k or other assets that will generate sufficient retirement income for you, then that is a great first step. Perhaps you don't have to be concerned about how concentrated your wealth is in your home. If you have a lot of liquid assets, stocks, bank accounts, things that you can sell on the open market and easily and readily convert into cash, then again, that is not something to be concerned about. Note that if you have significant liquid assets, chances are your home is not your only asset, because by definition, you have these other assets, and so you probably would not fall into the category of 70% or more of your net worth being in your home. You also want to look at the cost for housing. Is this something that is affordable? Can you see yourself living on retirement income and being able to afford this home as it relates to maintenance, as it relates to taxes, if you're in an association, as it relates to those association payments, and of course insurance? Are you going to be able to keep that in place? Are your costs reasonable relative to the space that you need and what you're paying? And then last but not least, how strong of an estate planning process you have in place? Are your beneficiaries protected? And particularly if you have dependents who are going to be relying on income from you at a later point in the process. So, and strong estate planning. So are your beneficiaries protected from real estate fluctuations? So these are the 4 areas to consider when you're evaluating whether or not the equity that you have, the level of equity that you have, is safe. Now, when does it become risky? Having a whole lot of equity or the majority of your net worth tied up in your home becomes risky when you are on a fixed income. In other words, this is never going to change because we know there's inflation, prices are going to continue, you're on a fixed income, and a fixed income in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. That fixed income has to just be sufficient to absorb or to address the expected increases over time, because you can be in a situation where your fixed income is 100% adequate to meet your needs currently, but 10 years from now, when prices are up 10 or 15 or 20%, chances are that income may still be close to where it was when you retired. Are you going to have room to absorb those rising costs or any unexpected expenses? A big challenge for homeowners in our South Florida area is homeowners insurance. We have had a couple of really rough years from a hurricane perspective, and so we have seen premiums go up significantly over the last couple of years. We're starting to see some moderation and things are getting better, but spiking premiums can be a concern if you're on a fixed income and you don't have anywhere to go to pull additional funding. Another concern is if you have major repairs looming. The life of your roof can be 15 to 20 years depending on what you have on it. Chances are over the course of your retirement, you may need to put a new roof on the property. That could be tens of thousands of dollars. You may need to replace your HVAC, your air conditioning system, water heater, any major repairs. As homes age, there is a need for major repairs. When these big ticket items arrive, are you going to be able to meet them, or is your fixed income just enough to keep you going and deal with regular life expenses and it can't accommodate any of these additional changes? And then last but not least is your healthcare needs. You have an asset that's not liquid. If you become ill and you need to pull funds out to address medical care, long-term care costs, how are you going to cope with that if you don't have resources set aside to be able to deal with that, then having all your equity tied up in your home may be a risky proposition and one that does not serve your best interest. The thing that most people don't recognize is that the equity in your home is a non-performing asset. So say you have a home that has $700,000 in equity, and that's a big number, but not outside of the realm of what is possible. We have a lot of retirees who bought a home 15, 20 years ago for $185,000. The home is now worth six, seven, possibly $800,000. That equity over the course of the time, they have paid down a significant portion of the mortgage, and so what we're looking at is a situation where they have a lot of equity that's sitting in the home. Equity in your home is like having cash in your mattress. It earns 0% interest. There's no return on that investment. But you can take that equity and put some of it in a conservative portfolio that, one, will be liquid, and two, would conceptually pay between 4 to 6% annually. And so that is an opportunity for that equity, instead of just sitting there, to continue to earn and to help to sustain you and your portfolio. Over a 20-year period, the difference between $700,000 in your home doing nothing and $700,000 at work, even at 4 to 6% of a return, is close to $1 million in lost compounding that you're walking away from. So that's real retirement income that you've given up because of having all of your net worth tied into your home. Now, there are some things that you can do to take advantage of this, but there's some important things not to do, because that just offsets any benefit that you would have. So let's talk about what you can do to leverage that equity that you currently have in your home. So let's talk about a couple of strategies that you can use to tap into the equity in your home. The first one is that you can downsize and release the equity and invest that into something that is very secure and very conservative. So you sell, move to a smaller home, and put the difference to work in a diversified portfolio. That's going to, one, give you the diversification that we talked about, and two, start generating some income on that equity that would not have been available had it remained in your home. The second thing that you can do is relocate strategically. We don't have to move to a tax-friendly state, because we are considered here in Florida a fairly tax-friendly state as it is, and we have no state income tax. But maybe moving to somewhere that has lower property taxes or a lower cost of living could be an option where you relocate. Your expenses are lower. Again, when you relocate, you would sell your home, release that equity, be able to invest it, go somewhere where it costs less to live, so you're not going to be using up the equity that you just freed up in new expenses. Your housing costs are going to be lower. And then the third thing to do is potentially convert to an income property. So if you're in a single family home now, look at moving potentially into a duplex or into a property that has an accessory dwelling unit. We've had a lot of talk locally in Broward and Dade County about allowing homeowners to convert portions of their property to accessory dwelling units. That could be a small structure in the back of the property, or converting a garage or a portion of the property into a property that could be rented out, or that is an additional dwelling unit. Those are things that are happening in our area now, and that could be a consideration. What I don't want you to do is borrow the money against the equity to go and invest, because when you borrow the money, now there is a cost associated to accessing the funds, and unless the return on your investment is going to be greater than the cost of borrowing those funds, you are in a negative position. So if at all possible, to free up the equity, you don't want to borrow it, because again, you're incurring additional costs. You want to sell, release the equity so that it's yours free and clear with no additional entrapments, and now you can invest it. If you are going to borrow the money to invest, you want to pay very close attention to what the costs are to borrow the money versus what the return is going to be on the investment, and make sure that the gap is significant enough for it to make sense for you and for you not to be upside down in that particular situation. So I'm not a big believer in borrowing to access funds to invest, but I have known folks who have done it and they've had some degree of success. At the end of the day, it's not about selling. So the goal of this video is not to talk you into selling your property. It's about balancing and rebalancing, making sure that you're aligning your real estate with your overall needs and your overall portfolio before you need it. It's managing the risk, making sure that you don't have everything that you own in one vehicle, in one property type, in one location, so that if something happens, you're forced to sell, and now because time is an issue, you may be forced to take a significant discount and walk away from potential funds that would be available if you had a longer timeline. I always tell people that in my opinion, you only lose money in real estate when you're up against a timeline. If you have a long enough window, it's really, in my opinion, very hard to lose money. But people who are up against a hard stop, a hard date, a hard timeline, they have to get the funds out by a specific date, they have to relocate by a specific time. Those type of situations cause problems, because now you're not free to wait until the market is in an optimal space for you to get the best return. You now have to address the market where it stands, and sometimes that's in your favor, which is great, but oftentimes it's not, and the need for speed translates into lost profits. So again, it's looking at your overall situation and making sure that at the end of the day, you don't find yourself cash strapped with an asset that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now having to go to the market to try to get it sold, and finding yourself having to take discounts or having to accommodate different requests from a potential buyer that under normal circumstances you just wouldn't consider because you are in a desperate situation. So at 60, it's important to remember, and 60 is just a general number, it's not hard and fast, but as we move into that retirement phase of life, your focus is shifting. What is important is shifting, it's changing, and what you're looking to do is you're looking to go from growth to protection. You're going from accumulation, because what happens is that in any investment environment, they'll tell you that they can get you a higher return if you're willing to take on more risk. When you have a longer runway, you can afford to take that risk, because if something goes wrong, you have time to recover. As you're getting closer to retirement, there is less time for you to recover from a market fluctuation. So your goal is not so much focused on accumulating more assets. It's more about protecting the assets that you have and making sure that you're positioning yourself to have sustainable income over the long term. The most important thing to do is to look at your asset allocations, making sure that you understand where your funds are, where your wealth is, and what tools you have available to be able to tap into that wealth as you get closer to retirement if the need arises. I am happy to sit with you to look at your portfolio and to talk with you about what is possible, what you should be keeping into consideration. If you'd like to schedule a complimentary phone consultation with me, please visit my website at simplyaskSharon.com, and I'll be happy to schedule a time. We'll talk about strategies. We'll talk about what you can do as it relates to your real estate. I am not a financial advisor, so I'm not going to give you investment advice, but I can certainly talk to you about the tax consequences of keeping or selling your home, as well as strategies that you can use to diversify, so that at the end of the day you have the liquidity that you need to be able to meet your needs as they present themselves. I hope you found this information helpful. If you did, please remember to like the video as well as to subscribe to our channel so that you can be notified when new videos get posted. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.